Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Ben Phelps, aka PrimalBro, has lost over 150 pounds on ketogenic and carnivorous diets. He also competes in Brazilian Jujitsu and holds a blue belt. Ben is a major positive influencer in this space, publishing approximately 3 videos a week and diving into a broad range of topics, including practical keto and carnivore tips, recipes, product reviews, Q&As, mindset, life transformation, family, goals, character, and more. He also shares excellent content on his Instagram. I've personally loved watching Ben's content and benefited a lot from his information over the years. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you, Scott, for having me.
Of course. So I'd love to just start where I start with a lot of my guests, which is how did your health get out of control and what were you kind of suffering from?
So my health had essentially just been on a downward trend since I was a kid. Like when I was real young, we had to shop. When my parents would take me shopping, we'd have to buy husky pants. So weight was always a thing in elementary school and middle school. I was the big kid or the fat kid. And then in high school, I was the big guy, but I could kind of play it off with humor and things like that. And it never really got to me. And there were not a lot of health issues when I was young. But then in my 20s, it started to kind of get out of control once I could make my own decisions. I developed really poor habits with my eating, just overeating the wrong things. No matter what diet you're following, anybody would agree if they saw the way that I was eating for a long time that nobody should be eating like that. A lot of pizzas, chili cheese dogs, and things like that. So I went to a doctor's appointment and I got the talk that a lot of people get, like, hey, something's got to change. This marker looks bad, pre-diabetic. This a pretty standard story for a lot of people who have gone through weight loss, particularly like ketogenic weight loss. So at that point, I had kids. I was beginning to become very overweight. I hit my highest or heaviest I ever was 333 pounds. So like everything just kind of came to a head all within a few months of each other. I'm a father now. My weight's getting really out of control. My health is now becoming a problem along with the weight. So I needed to do something. And the first step that I ever took, or the first thing I ever tried that worked, was a paleo approach, because it made a lot of sense to me. I never had any luck with the eat less, move more, because I so severely did not want to do either of those things. I wanted to eat more and move less, and that was my goal most of the time. But when I found paleo, it was simplified enough. It was essentially, early man, our ancestors, they weren't tracking. They weren't monitoring what their caloric intake was and consciously moving around. They were eating intuitively from the things that were available, and they were getting really essential movements. So I discovered paleo. That made sense, and I had a lot of success with paleo. That actually helped me, because you said in the intro that I had lost 155 pounds through keto and carnivore, and that's not necessarily entirely true. I lost 120 pounds on a paleo diet.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and that was, I never tracked once doing that. It was very intuitive, just kind of eating when I was hungry, making sure I stuck to, if it has a pulse or if it grows out of the ground, essentially that was what I could eat it. It was fair game. So that worked really well. And then I had what I always like to breeze past and just kind of call it an existential crisis. I had like a rough patch in my life, and I had some mental problems, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I gained back 80 pounds that I had lost doing paleo, and particularly Mark Sissons' Primal Blueprint. That was a big catalyst for who I've become today and what I value about health and things like that. But once I gained back 80 pounds after losing 120. And then when I really recommitted myself and got back into those same resources that were sharing all the paleo information I was enjoying before and using before, when I jumped back into it, there was talk about keto. And it made sense because the Primal Blueprint, like I talked about, that had an emphasis on fat intake, and it talked about a lot of the same benefits that a ketogenic diet talked about. So it kind of seemed like a logical progression. So I went keto, and then that's when I lost most of the weight that got me down to 155 pounds. I got down to 186 on keto, and then when I went carnivore, that really broke that stall, and I got down to 178, and that's how I got to the 155 pounds lost. But carnivore has been much more about body composition. I've gained weight, but I look better, measure better, clothes fit better, that type of thing. So carnivore has really not proven to me to be a weight loss tool, because that portion of my journey, so to speak, was largely over at the time I began. But carnivore has changed a lot of things about my life that aren't necessarily just about weight.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I loved your post the other day about how many things Mark Sisson had right so long ago. And really his message, his rules for living are so simple, but I think they get a lot of people most of the way.
Yeah. I mean, it talks about, plants and animals, and then obviously plants is there's more nuance to it, right? But eat plants and animals, move around a little bit, get sunlight, avoid accidents. I mean, it's really basic stuff that we would all really benefit from. But it's weird because it seems logical and obvious to me now, but it took me 24 years almost of my life to find something that made sense. So I'll take it.
Yeah, me too. And talk about finding keto and finding carnivore and how your health kind of improved. You mentioned not just the physical, but the mental aspect.
So when I went keto, like I said, I was kind of rebounding from like some depressive stuff, some depression that I had been dealing with. And I did see people talk about benefits. So I was really encouraged by that. And like I said, it just kind of aligned with the way that I had been eating before, which had proven so successful. So I start keto, and the weight starts to come off pretty quickly again, just like it did on paleo. But then I noticed, I'm not getting as hungry as early in the day as I was before. I realized, I'm not tired in the middle of the day, even though I had lunch. I don't have a crash after I eat. On paleo, I was still eating plenty of sweet potatoes, right? And regardless of how clean a carb is, there's still a little bit of a disruption there. I mean, a lot of apples, right? Fruit was fair game. So I never got away from that hunger and the crash. But keto did that. Keto got me away from it. And it's like I said, the weight was melting off. I was never really sore. It's never something that I dealt with a lot, except when I was like severely overweight. So I didn't notice a lot of the inflammation benefits until I went carnivore. After I had been keto for a while, I started carnivore because Sean Baker was doing World Carnivore Month. Try it for 30 days. It was January 2008 was the commitment. I'm an impatient person, so I started, I think, like December 27th or something like that. And I was just gonna do it till the end of January and say, hey, that was an experiment. I'll see how I feel. And I'm now on month 20 of my 30-day experiment. And carnivore has been where I really noticed the anti-inflammatory benefits, I should say. I never really realized how inflamed I was just from the few carbohydrates I was eating or the few plant foods I was eating until I made that switch. And everything has just been trending upwards. And essentially all those benefits I got on keto, the not being overly hungry, be leaning out and keeping weight under control, and the mental clarity, all of it. It sounds really cliche when I hear myself say it. But all of those things, when I went from keto to carnivore, they got amplified. They got like an extra 25%. So it was kind of like, it's like keto on steroids. I'm sure someone has said that before, and it's really cheesy and lame, but that really is what it felt like to me.
Yeah, it's not cheesy and lame at all. It's true, and that's how I felt. And folks asked like why I went all the way to carnivore, especially people who are not keto or diet conscious, and I just described that, as a progression. I felt better each time I removed things, and more energy, better sleep, better strength, better mental acuity, stuff like that. So can totally relate. And can you talk about, Ben, why you created PrimalBro and what's your inspiration there and why you keep making content?
So all roads lead back to Mark Sisson in that sense, because that's the primal in my name and in my brand and my handle, and all of it is like and paying homage to, or in kind of like in honor of, because like I said, the primal blueprint that he put out in early 2000s, I believe, and I found after it had been out for a while, that made a huge impact on my life. Like I said, a lot of those principles still kind of guide me to this day. So I started PrimalBro just as a website and a resource for like some paleo primal recipes. And the bro part is because most of the websites out there, especially at the time for paleo, were really tailored towards women. So if you wanted to find a recipe, you were also scrolling through like sports bra reviews and swimsuit, like, you know what I'm saying? Unboxings. And
yeah.
Things that weren't necessarily applicable or interesting and just kind of felt like noise, and they got in the way. And that, like I said, I was like, okay, so what if I did something more masculine and more simplified? And that was what it started as, was just me putting some recipes online and putting things out there. I abandoned it during those few months that I was depressed, and I gained back the 80 pounds. And then when I came back to it, I wanted to kind of keep up doing the same thing. But when I found keto, I started doing some keto recipes. And then that just didn't really feel right. It didn't feel like what I wanted to be. It was just a recipe creator. It's like, I want to have the kind of impact in people's lives that Mark Sisson had on mine. So then I kind of developed it into what it is today with YouTube and Instagram and podcasting, coaching, just more direct impact and more useful for people's lives than just, oh, here's a recipe that is compliant with my way of eating.
Yeah, that's awesome. And can you talk about your style and kind of what's different about your channel from some of the other keto and carnivore channels out there?
So a big one, and this may turn some people off and it may interest some people. I've found very mixed feedback on this, but I recognize who I am and what I am. And I know that I'm not a scientist. I'm just a guy who does it a certain way. And essentially it's about sharing what's worked for me, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and where I've been. I like to talk about weight loss and the mindset of weight loss, which is another life experience that a lot of other content creators, especially like in a carnivore keto space, they haven't gone through a tremendous amount of weight loss like I have. A fun way that I like to say it is like, oh, I've lost over 100 pounds twice, because that just sounds more impressive than saying I 155 pounds. But essentially, I just want to be an example and an inspiration. The way I like to sum it up a lot of times is I want to inform, inspire, and then possibly entertain, because I'm just being myself most of the time. Some of it's funny, some of it's kind of depressing maybe, but whatever you're getting me. And I like to think that I have a lot of good life experience and perspective to share on everything weight loss to low carb to carnivore and all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're extremely genuine, and that definitely comes through in every episode. And I love the way you edit and the way you narrate the episodes. It's like almost like a long form podcast, but pithier. and you're getting these like slices of information, and it's also entertaining, bringing you along throughout your day, in the vlog format at least, but also diving deep into certain topics. I think you do a good job dissecting them, so I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and what do you eat in a day now, Ben? Understand it probably varies a lot, but what does kind of an average day of eating look like for you?
You may be surprised how much it doesn't. Really
Okay.
So now today, or in recent days, I've been doing one meal a day for a while, because going back to the tendencies and the traits that I have that led me to be overweight in the first place. Another problem, or one of my issues that I have, is just when I start eating, I just want to eat, right? I want to get down. So while carnivore, just based on food selection and the nature of the diet, it gives you a little more wiggle room in terms of volume, how much food you're going to consume. One meal a day does a similar thing with meal timing. It's all like an unintentional calorie restriction. But I know that I'm eating optimal foods, and I'm going to really stock up on them. A normal day for me is probably anywhere from 2 to 3 pounds of red meat, and then possibly something with that's more of a garnish for it. If I have burgers, I might put cheese on them. If I have ground beef, sometimes what I really like to do is air fry chicken thighs, very crispy, and then chop that meat up and kind of mix it in with the ground beef. But typically it's just a beef primary staple, whether that be a ribeye, ground beef, burgers, or whatever, and then possibly something on the side, variety, maybe sausage, chicken. I honestly rarely ever do pork, and I've really lost a lot of my taste for bacon, which almost hurts me to say, but but not so much, right? Because I don't crave it. It's not all it's chalked up to be, in my opinion. But I'll take a good crispy chicken thigh with my beef, and I think that's just as good or even better. So not a ton of variety. It's prioritizing red meat, and then maybe something in there just to kind of mix some tastes up,
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And I know, you do OMAD a lot. Why do you do that, and how has that kind of evolved for you?
So it was like I was saying, it helps me be able to scratch the itch, so to speak, for my need to eat a lot of food all at once. Once I start eating, it's hard to stop, in a really dramatic way of saying it. I just enjoy consuming large volumes of food. And I find, especially with the appetite suppressant qualities of these carbohydrate restrictive diets, keto and carnivore, I don't need to eat that often. So I can restrict myself to one meal a day very easily, maintaining my workouts and not feeling any slack there. And I just I like to go all in and eat a lot of food all at once. So it's a really simple workaround for some of my issues or tendencies, so to speak, depending on what perspective you want to take on it.
Yeah, totally. I think it makes a ton of sense. And how about things like organs, supplements, electrolytes? How do you handle some of those?
So electrolytes, I heavily salt everything. Again, and going back to Sean Baker, that was just something that I picked up on early on, and it's helped a lot. I didn't have the carnivore flu, if we want to call it that, because some people, even when they go from keto to carnivore, they experience those same type of symptoms or issues. But I never had any of that because I've been heavily salting from the beginning, and that's something I continue to do to this day. I do take BHBs, so exogenous ketones, before JiuJitsu, which technically breaks my fast. I'm not overly concerned about that. The primary reason I take those is for the large electrolyte content. It's hard to find a lot of supplements that fit what I'm looking for in terms of macros and quality that have a large amounts of potassium, sodium, and magnesium. So I use BHBs for that. And organ meats, I have been severely slacking, but I like to say that I do 4 ounces once every 2 weeks, which isn't as much as many out there, but it's more than some. So really it just depends where you want to fall on that. But I do try to get 4 ounces in every, say, 10 to 14 days.
Yeah. And I think that overall approach makes a ton of sense. And I'm curious, you seem to eat a lot of ribeyes. So not all the time. You're definitely eating a mix of food, but I'm curious, as a dad, someone who needs to support a family, how do you make this diet affordable?
So for my family, and especially for me, a big part of it is shopping deals. So checking sales at various stores. I'm not opposed to going to 3 different stores if it means that I'm going to save big cash on the beef that I'm looking for. So that's one way. And another thing that I like to say, I haven't done this myself as much as I would like, but it's always going to be cheaper the earlier in the process you can involve yourself. So on one end of the spectrum, you have people who hunt and fish or raise livestock themselves. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who just go to the grocery store and buy meat. Now, you can be anywhere between those two, and I try to get as early in the process as I can. I've only really struck up some deals at the farmer's market just based on my volume and frequency. So it's like, well, look, I can promise you this much is going to keep. I'm going to buy this much, right? I've proven it by doing it several weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And then you negotiate, and then you can just kind of negotiate from there, and you find your supplier, right? You find your farmer. I've done that, a handful of that. Most of what I get does come from grocery stores and local markets based on shopping the sales. I hope to get more into the farmer's market again. And what I'm really aiming to do early next year is go in on a cow portion, whether that be a half or quarter. Or something like that. But it's always going to be cheaper the earlier in that process you can get. So if you're raising the cow yourself, that's likely going to, or that obviously that's going to be cheaper than going and buying a similar quantity of meat at the grocery store. If you're hunting, that's relatively low cost as well. So just as early in that animal's life and the process of creating and getting that meat you can get, then that's going to be best.
Yeah, that's a great point. I haven't thought about it that way, but it makes a ton of sense. And I like your negotiating at farmers markets. I'm going to have to try that.
And so a lot of them are open to it because they do that's not the farmers market's not their only gig. So I've found more than I expected to be interested, and a handful actually will work with me. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. And, they don't want to go home from the farmer's market without selling product. So it makes a ton of sense. And how does your diet affect your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Can you talk a little bit about that? How you got into it, how different diets have you performed on it, and things like that?
So this is where I do lack experience in a sense of I started Jiu-Jitsu while I was following the ketogenic diet. So I can't compare it to a high carb approach, or anything like that. I did notice that switching from carnivore to keto, I felt maybe it was less than a month. I think it was about 3 weeks where I just really wasn't feeling it. My strength wasn't there. My explosiveness wasn't there. I still had the energy to go all day long, but I didn't have the power that I wanted to complement that endurance. Slowly but surely after that 3 weeks, it just kind of trended upward. And now I am the best athlete that I believe I have ever been. And that's, again, following a carnivore diet. I attribute a lot of it to carnivore. A big impact that I think it has on my training is that there's a lot of talk. The jiu-jitsu community, it's meme heavy. They do a lot of memes and a lot of jokes that, you'll get it if you're in it, right? But so one of them is always about how sore people always are. I was like, I did jiu-jitsu last night, sore the next day. I'm always sore. This hurts, that hurts. And I don't experience that. I hear my peers talk about it. Like I said, it's popular enough or common enough where there's a meme about it. And it's just not something that I deal with. And I sincerely believe that that's because of, again, the inflammatory benefits or anti-inflammatory benefits of eating like this.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I have a funny and sad Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu story. I think partly from watching your channel and partly from listening to Joe Rogan, I was like, all right, I have to do this. This was like a year and a half ago. And I went to this great gym, I think, very highly regarded, highly rated here in Boston. And there was a great trainer there that day, just dropped in for a class. They let me join. There were some more experienced guys there, some relatively new guys there, all different sizes, most of them men over 200 pounds. At the time, I was about 160 pounds soaking wet. And we do some drills, we do some technical stuff, and then they're like, okay, now we're going to, do round robin, take times just like sparring with a partner. Scott, you can sit out if you want. And I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I was like kind of amped up in the moment, wanted to try it out, get the absolute crap beaten out of me with every person, people bigger than me, smaller than me. And after every round, they're like, yeah, you should take one off. Like, it's all good. Like, you don't have to keep going. And I was just getting like sat on by these 200+ pound guys, maybe 250 pounds. And I was like, wow, that was so fun. I left and I was like, yeah, I can't wait to do this more. Started feeling like some aches and pains as I was cooling down, like going home on the subway, and realized later that like I wasn't going to be able to walk very much for a few days. My back was in complete pain, and I had it actually turned out that I had broken one of the tiny little ribs at the bottom of your rib cage.
Oh, those floaters. Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, maybe it's time to back off. I just got way overly ambitious with it.
That's crazy. Now we're going to flip it. So now it's my interview.
Okay, go.
Do you plan on getting back into it at any point, or do you see it in your future at all again? I am a pusher. Like anybody who finds anything they like, they want to get as many people to do that thing as they can. So I'm going to pressure you a little, but I am going to ask. I did want to ask.
Please do. Yeah,
I did want to ask sincerely. Do you think you'll go back to it, give it another try, or
I think
different goals?
Not in the near term, because I have different goals and physically how I want to spend my time, spend my energy, more focused on like rehabilitating some of my injuries from rowing. I was a competitive rower for a long time, and growing muscle. But I do love the mental aspect and the community aspect and the humility and the learning and modesty and all those parts. So I think at some point I will start like old man jiu-jitsu. It's just a matter of time.
Awesome. No, look great. That's what I like to hear. But do you have now? Like now, I really am changing it. But you have lingering issues from rowing?
Yeah, basically any activity that involves any form of twisting, my back just starts to seize up and gets in really bad pain. So I can't even kayak casually. I can't canoe. I can't stand up paddleboard. I can't play tennis. And as soon as I start to do those activities, I feel really good. And then once I'm done, like an hour after finishing, I'm like, oh, that was a mistake.
Oh, yeah. And jiu-jitsu is one of the last things I think I'd ever want to do if I couldn't twist.
Yeah. Does anyone at jiu-jitsu talk about your diet or ask about it?
They all follow me on Instagram. They're totally aware of everything that I do. You see, like, if you ever watch videos where I'm at a tournament, you'll see some of them like glance at the camera because like they know it's there. So they are aware, they ask about it, they talk about it, but there are a handful of people who I've gotten to try keto. And there's actually one guy who maintains that pretty well. So I feel good about that. Cause like I said, it's all about direct impact, and having a substantial direct impact on someone's life. So that made me happy. He dropped some weight with keto and he still trains and everything. There are a handful, I get some questions every now and then. And there's a couple though that are also hard standouts, and they eat oatmeal for breakfast, right? It's like IIFYM.
Yeah.
Type.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a spectrum there of acceptance and questioning, but the nice thing about that is that it kind of comes back to jiu-jitsu over everything. So we're still almost like brothers at the end of it, even though some of them don't necessarily, they're not picking up what I'm putting down,
Yeah, that's great. That totally makes sense. It goes beyond diet, which is really cool. And how has your wife's journey been woven into yours?
So she has lost, I should know the number, but also over 100 pounds herself. And she's a follower. So I like to learn new things. Like and I get obsessive over them. So when I want to learn something or want to know about it, I'm all in, and I'm obsessed with it for at least a week. And then we'll see where it goes from there. Jiu-Jitsu, dieting, ancestral eating, it's all kind of comes from that same thing. Like I'm all the way in. And she likes to kind of sit back a little bit, see how that goes for me, and then she'll try it. So it started with paleo. And then she did the same thing with keto. She never took the plunge and went all the way carnivore, although she does have days very regularly that are, say, 10 grams total carbs. So it's a very, very low carb ketogenic approach for her. But yeah, she's been she prepared me more than anything else for offering the coaching services that I offer in terms of people asking questions and needing help tweaking this and tweaking that. Oh, I have headaches in the morning. I'm not losing weight, right? She was my first client and it was intensive. So it makes everything else seem easier. You know?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. I definitely think it's much easier to do as a couple, by the way. My fiance eats carnivore 95% of the time. And yeah, it's just so much easier. I can't imagine what it would be like if if she was eating like the standard American diet or completely questioning everything I did.
Yeah. So when I first went paleo, she's always been really supportive. I've never gotten the questioning and the eye rolls. And part of that's because, like I said, I become obsessive. So almost anything I do, she knows that I have good reasons for doing it. So she is very supportive. I'll give her that. But like I said, she's a holdout, a standout. So when I started doing paleo, it was a few months of her and everybody eating a standard American diet still. And that was a big mental struggle for me, always having pizza and Pop-Tarts in the house and things like that. But once she saw it and she got on board, everything became so much easier. You know what I mean? It really is tremendously easy to do it as a unit, family unit, whether that be you and one other person or like us. We have kids at this point now. There's 5 of us. We have 3 kids and the 2 of us. And the kids also eat pretty low carb. And we do have them, like we have fruit in here. They'll get berries. They'll even get apples, bananas sometimes. It's a pretty flexible. They're way more paleo than anything else, but we do have a rule in our house that you prioritize the meat. So any meal that you have is going to have at least one source of meat, if not multiple, or proteins. And that's what you're going to eat first. And then once you're done with that, you can work on your broccoli or your apples or whatever you want to have after that.
Yeah, sounds like a really great approach. And, I'm following great parents like you and Danny Vega and others, for how I think about how I'll do it when I have children. And, how have your kids been affected, less around like what you feed them, but how have they been affected by your transformation, and what you've been able to do now?
So it was hard to get a lot of feedback at the point at which I was at my heaviest and I started losing weight, because the 2 of the 3 were very young. And honestly, our youngest, I don't think will have any memories of me as anything other than what I am now. But I like to think that if I was going to pick one person for them to look up to, and it was the person I was at 333 pounds, or the person that I am today, it would be an easy decision. Hands down, it would be who I am today. And you can see it rub off because they have their own little kettlebell that they'll share and they'll use because they see me work out.
That's
like,
cool.
Yeah, they're into running. Like my wife really likes to run. That sounds like just like it'd be torture for me if I had to run, but my wife really enjoys it. And they like to go with her. Right. So I like to think that we're kind of setting a really healthy foundation so that they're more free to explore. They don't have to go through the weight loss and the figuring out that oatmeal is not a good breakfast option, right? We're going to do a lot of that groundwork or foundational work for them so that they're way more set up for both health and happiness as they get older.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And how do you enjoy, it seems like you've done a really great job connecting and forming these close bonds with folks on Instagram, a variety of people in the keto and carnivore space, how do you enjoy forming those connections? And I really enjoyed your video about KetoCon coming out of that and how important of an experience that was for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I enjoy, it goes back to me saying that when I'm in something, I'm all the way in, and I really want to have like-minded individuals, people who just have the same interests as me, to talk to and communicate with. And as many of us know, when you eat the way that we eat, even for regular keto dieters who are consuming lots of salad, right? They're still looked at in a weird sense, and there's not a lot of support locally for them. And then that's where I like to think Instagram comes in, because it gives you access to other people who do share those interests, and they have similar concepts. And while there may be disagreements within the, carbs for keto carb ups and that type of thing, there's still way more of a unifying factor. So finding all of these people and communicating was really just about having a community to support me, not just a community that constantly questioned me like I had in my real life. Again, my wife is very supportive, but that doesn't mean that my parents are, my friends, coworkers. And it can be discouraging if all you're getting is negative about what you're doing. So on Instagram, I found some positive, and I almost accidentally built this little community for myself. And then after I went to KetoCon, and there was like an energy. I know that you went to, it was a Keto Fest, right?
I went to Keto Fest and the Boulder Carnivore Conference. I really wish I had gone to KetoCon, but I'll definitely be there next year.
Yeah. Well, so I'll see you there next year, because I'm already excited for it. But I don't know if the other events had it. I'm assuming they did, but there's an energy in certain rooms. If you go see like a live football game.
Totally.
What makes it different than watching it on TV is that energy, the way it makes you feel. There's a very community-oriented energy at KetoCon, and it made me want to, what I looked at as like digital friendships that were like almost like a supportive chat room, more or less. I now look at as legit community, because I've put faces to the names and to the handles, and I've met these people and been just as supported in real life as I have been online. So I really want to keep building that and have a larger community of people like yourself that I get to talk to and can communicate with. And it doesn't always just have to be, hey, come on my podcast, or, please share this YouTube video. And when we can actually share messages about other things and comment on each other's posts and interact. And it just feels good, again, just to have a community of people who are interested in and or doing the same things as you. It's why I formed such a close relationship with the people at JiuJitsu, because we're in this thing together. And I'm trying to translate that same feeling to my Instagram and my online presence.
Yeah, that's an excellent message. I totally agree. And that's a huge part of why I started this podcast. And, I think a lot of people listening will be able to relate. It's all about human connection at the end of the day. So I think that's actually a great place to wrap up. So, Ben, I'd love to ask what's next for PrimalBro and where people can find out more about you. I'll link to it all on carnivorecast.com.
So something that you won't be able to link to yet, but I'll be bringing back my podcast here soon. I'm just looking into hosting options, which may be something I reach out to you to talk about how you host and distribute this podcast.
For sure.
Like you said, I'm consistent on my YouTube channel. That's PrimalBro. I'm PrimalBro there. I have a website, primalbro.com, but that mainly just directs you to these other things I'm talking about. And Instagram's probably where I'm most active. And you can find me there at PrimalBro. But basically, if there is a social media site or anything where you have a username and you look up PrimalBro, that's more than likely me, because I have been fortunate enough to get it on just about everything. PrimalBro@gmail.com. If you want to send me an email, we can talk about coaching, consultations, jiu-jitsu, anything that you want.
Very cool. Thanks so much for your time, Ben. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate coming on, and maybe we'll follow up one day in the future and see where we're at in 18 months.
I'd love that.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.